Okay.
Yep, it started.
Thanks, Cameron.
All right, thank you. All right, everybody. Nice to see everybody, especially Cynthia, who looks very comfortable out there that's where I want to be. Unfortunately, I'm not there with you, Cynthia, out enjoying nature. I have to be inside. But no, thank you. Thank you all for attending. I am really happy to see a good audience here, and I'm excited to share with you some of my thoughts on how to get current and decustomize people. So there's Jim Mary. Look at Jim Mary looking so dapper. I did not wear the tie today. You can always count on Jim to really dress the nines there. All right. So Jim has seen this presentation before. So Jim, I'm not going to cover much new ground here for you. Jim is an expert and a great resource if you ever want to reach out to somebody who is an absolute expert in the field on this stuff. My name is Cameron McClurg. That's me. I'm Vice President with SpearMC Consulting. You may have seen my name come up this week. This is my 5th session in the last 2 days. So I'm a little worn out, but hey, this is a topic I'm really passionate about, and I really enjoy it. I have background in PeopleSoft, Oracle Guided Learning, which you'll hear me talk about ad nauseum probably, about how that's going to be an awesome tool for you to consider. Cloud infrastructure we talked about yesterday. So I'm certified in all those things, and really my focus, I've been doing consulting for the last 4.5 years. Prior to that, I was probably in your guys' shoes. So I was managing PeopleSoft implementations, projects, support within a couple of different organizations. And what I did for those organizations, I thought, I could do that in the consulting world and just do it for lots of organizations. So that's kind of what I did. I hopped the fence over the consulting world. I've been with SpearMC for the last 4.5 years, and am enjoying working with all of you, hearing your stories, hearing your needs, trying to figure out how PeopleSoft can be used creatively to meet those needs. It's kind of my passion. So SpearMC is a good fit for me because SpearMC is dedicated 100% to PeopleSoft. We doubled down a few years ago in saying we are completely focused on PeopleSoft, where our customers are still committed to PeopleSoft. We felt that that's a niche in the market with a lot of other partners potentially moving to other technologies and other perhaps SaaS applications. We're like, we're gonna double down on PeopleSoft, and we're gonna do everything for PeopleSoft customers, whether that's different modules or pillars, the way we do work, managed services, implementations, projects, support, staff aug. I mean, anything in terms of how we do the work, where you put PeopleSoft, whether it's on-prem or if it's in the cloud, we want to help you with that. All the emerging technology and how to embrace new things like chatbots, cloud infrastructure, and guided learning. Obviously, a lot of you know about us because of our training. And then, obviously Kibana Analytics, which is something we've been at the forefront on as well. So, if it's PeopleSoft, the answer for us is yes, we do it. And we've been very fortunate to be recognized by Gartner for that focus on PeopleSoft, on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure specifically. So we're in the Gartner Market Guide 2021 and 2022 for Oracle Managed and Professional Services for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. We're the only PeopleSoft firm on that list, PeopleSoft dedicated firm, I should say. And that's really nice place for us to be, and really nice recognition of our focus on PeopleSoft. So we're really proud of that. Lots of sessions this week, guys. So we're I guess halfway through it. For me, this is my number 5, but we've got a lot of good stuff out there, a lot of good content. If you didn't get my Oracle Guided Learning session on Tuesday, you can watch the recording or come to my live demonstration tomorrow at 10:15 Pacific. That's 12:15 Central. Tomorrow, and see a half-hour demo of Oracle Guided Learning and how it's going to completely change your life. Well, maybe not your life, but maybe how you use PeopleSoft. All right, I'm going to throw a lot of information at you today. We're not going to go really deep into any one topic, but I'm going to try to cover as many topics as I possibly can with how you look at decustomizing PeopleSoft, which is a core to getting your application current and keeping it current. So before we get to all that decustomization, we really need to take a step back and talk about the current state of PeopleSoft. Unbelievably, I read an RFP this morning from an organization, who I will not say who that organization is, but in the RFP, it literally stated in the RFP that because PeopleSoft is end of life in 2033, we need to move to a SaaS. That is literally what it said in the RFP, and my jaw dropped, and I just thought to myself, I can't believe this is still a thing that people keep saying this. It's, as much as Paco and Rebecca, the organization says it is not end of life in 2033. We are announcing this because we want you to feel comfortable that the application will continue to evolve and continue to be innovated. Oracle is committed to this, and as much as they keep saying it, there's still this mindset that PeopleSoft somehow is at end of life or the innovation is going to slow. It has not slowed at all. And if you really pay attention and do your homework, you're going to see that this strategy they went with to really continue to build, to commit to customers, to say, we are still with you, customers. If you want to keep running PeopleSoft, we will be there with you and continue to evolve and innovate in PeopleSoft. And you're seeing that across the board. So it's a frustrating thing that we have to continue to try to change people's mindset, but that's out there. People say that. There's a lot of misinformation. And guys like Jim Merriam, myself, we are out there evangelizing all the time that you need to do your homework and pay attention. Don't drink the Kool-Aid of some of these firms who are telling you that you got to get off PeopleSoft right away. The sky is falling. It's not falling. So how does PeopleSoft, and this is actually a little bit older graphic, and so some of the numbers are actually wrong in here, but I really like it because, and I keep it because I think it shows you how Oracle looks at PeopleSoft. They balance strategic investment, so simplification, modernization, analytics, cloud emerging technology, and the framework for eliminate customizations, which we're going to talk a lot about today. They balance those strategic investments with customer-driven enhancements, requests coming directly from customers. You can go through and look at the features that all of the product roadmaps roll out there, and they'll say right here, this came from Idea Spaces, this came from this customer, this came from this other customer. They are well involved, they are well connected with customers and their customer needs, and they're bringing really pertinent, needed changes and updates to the application to be relevant. Stuff they did in the last 2 years related to handling pandemic, work from home, all that stuff they're doing, remote worker stuff. It is right there. It's relevant. It is not the signs of an application that is going away. All right. So it's just really important to point that out. So how does Oracle address this? And some of this was going to be very basic for you. I know some of you are very well entrenched in this and understand a lot of stuff, but I'm going to start with some basics and we're going to get into some more complicated stuff. So the PUM, PeopleSoft Update Manager, it's continual improvement. I actually need to change this slide because it's going to be now 3 images per year, and perhaps in the future it'll be 2. But the number of features is not slowing down. It's just changing how many times those images are going to come out. So right now it's going to be three times per year. It does also include things like regulatory patches, tax updates, 1099, etc. So PUM is your way of getting all that stuff. And the question is, how do we take advantage of that? So if you look at the standard sort of path of how you take those changes in from that PeopleSoft Update Manager and bring them into your application, this is a simple graphic that walks you through the sequence of that. And somebody very technical might look and say, well, there's some nuance here and there, but generally this is the process, right? So you're going to bring in those images, you're going to create this change package, and you're going to apply it to your environments. And that sounds really easy. And if you had a completely vanilla environment, it would be this easy. It would be very, very fast. There would be very little need to test, and that's fine. The problem is that you have to, this number 6 here, you have to reapply your customizations to the tailored change package. And when you do that, you actually have to then, it ramps up the need to do more thorough testing, of course. And so the testing of that process will create this cycle of applying the customization, testing, finding bugs, fixing, retesting, and now you're in a bit of a cycle there. And this is not scientific at all, but my sort of thought is that this is about 90% of the project effort. And so if you're going to spend that much time having to reapply customizations and testing, then there's two primary things that you need to think about. One is decustomizing, and two is automated testing. I'm not covering automated testing today. That's PTF. We have other sessions on PTF. Go take a look. And we do a lot of stuff with PTF and test as a service. We are going to focus on how do we reduce that burden of applying customizations today. Okay. So, and by the way, a bit of housekeeping I forgot to say, we're not using the chat in the Zoom window. You've probably heard this from all your other sessions. Don't use the chat in the Zoom session. Use the chat in the Pathable website, the chat in there, and that's going to be monitored. And I'll jump back in there and see if there's any questions. So, but don't use the chat in Zoom. Okay, so customization retrofitting, long test cycles, number one reason why organizations can't or don't stay current. So, the question is, how do we get here? And I always say this, or, a brief history of PeopleSoft development. So, kind of PeopleSoft's been out there. People love it because it's platform independent. It's open source. We can look at the things, everything behind the scenes. If you talk to, again, anybody who does development, you're actually going to be able to say, hey, we love PeopleSoft because we can actually see behind the scenes. Here you're looking at, for example, the user's profile screen in PeopleSoft. You can look at it from behind the scenes. I can dig into every single one of those fields, and here it is from the front end. So if I can get to it from the back end, doesn't that mean that we can change the code? And does that mean that we can go and tinker with it? And the answer is yes. And that's what people loved about it and have loved for a long time about it, because we can actually tinker with it, we can understand what's happening, we can build bolt-ons. But what I always say is, that strength taken to an extreme can become a weakness, or I could say it's like an albatross that's hanging over PeopleSoft customers' heads, because now they've made modifications to their application and now they're kind of stuck. And because now it takes so long to bring in new updates, now they've kind of created a static application that can't evolve, can't bring in those new features because those features don't work because they conflict with your customizations. So that really becomes a weakness. So here's a standard methodology. There's nothing, earth-shattering about this, but this is a standard methodology that we use when we come and talk to people. We work with them to help them identify a future state disposition for their customizations. The first step is really to inventory your customizations, and that could be utilizing existing documentation, doing a compare report, looking at actual transactions. How does this transaction differ from a demo transaction? I think we might have a customization there, or just, looking at screens. What I always say is, and people don't do this enough, okay? They skip this step all the time, and I say, don't skip the step. The step is take a look at your customizations and reconcile them to your requirements. Does this requirement that is meeting this need of this customization, does it actually align with organizational strategic objectives? Or did somebody back in the day change the color of the screen or change the language on the screen to change that field to be called something different? Does that actually align to your strategic objectives at your organization? If the answer is not really, then do you need it? And is there a possibility that we could actually, just get rid of that customization? So you actually can eliminate customizations really easily if you just say, if you create a higher bar for when we do a customization. So once we kind of figure out what the requirements are, we can eliminate them. We can say, you know what, that requirement was a requirement back in 2000. It's no longer a requirement, or it might be something people wanted, but it's just not something we want to do anymore. So you can actually just eliminate them. But for the ones, and so, if there's a delivered feature now, and there's thousands of delivered features that are out there that people aren't using, if you can just say, you know what, that thing that we were doing, there's a feature for that. For example, payment request in financials, we can actually just roll out this payment request feature where people just go in there and request this. Now, previously we might have created bolt-on or some kind of custom process for people to get reimbursements through AP. Now you can just say, you know what, we don't need that. Let's just use the delivered payment request functionality, and it just works out of the box, right? Thousands of new features that are delivered. So we could just eliminate customizations and go towards delivered. But if the answer is no, that delivered feature, there's no delivered feature, or that feature doesn't work for us, we have the next question. Can the requirement that we have be met with a configurable tool set? And if the answer is yes, okay, what are those configurable tool sets? and configurable, quote unquote, configurable enhancements that would allow us to make modifications to that functionality without actually doing customization. And that's what we're going to focus a lot of time today on. Finally, if the answer is no, we can't, there's no deliver functionality, and no, we can't even modify deliver functionality with a configurable enhancement, then you're looking at potentially the concept of bolt-on, right? So you're isolating, you're creating your own code, your own perhaps pages to do your own thing. And that's if that requirement can be met with isolated code. If you get through all of those filters and the answer is no, we can't do any of that, then you're down to this last final step, which is truly customization of delivered functionality. And I would make the statement at this point, there's very little reason to have to do customization anymore. Yes, there are hooks that we can use to bring in our code, but there really should be this isolated bolt-on code model first. And have a very high bar for when we say, no, actually we need to modify delivered objects, because that creates technical debt. Okay, so the next section and the rest of this time is going to be looking at why do we customize, and then what is the old way of doing that, and what's the new way of doing meeting those needs. Before I do that, I'm just going to find out, are there any questions so far? Let me just jump over here. Looks like there's no questions. Okay. And feel free just to go ahead and put your question in that chat window on the Pathable platform. Okay, so what are the different use cases for customization? So let's talk about the first one: organizational specific terminology, defaulting of values, required fields, hide fields, data masking, and I would also say embedded training documentation. That's one that's in there that I just added into this slide. So the old way to do that, we've got things like field relabels, we've got people code on pages that we modify. We've got page modifications, or we say, oh, we'll just do security restrictions. This is a great page, but there's one piece of information on this page that invalidates the whole page from being able to give this to people because it's sensitive information. So we have to restrict people. They can't see 99% of this page because there's 1% and one piece of information that's sensitive. So we don't even let them see that page, or we create a bolt-on page that only gives them the stuff that they want, not the sensitive information. Not needed, okay? The new way: page and field configurator, event mapping, and Oracle guided learning. Let's take a look at these examples. Here we've got a page. This is the before example. This is a completely delivered page. I think this is project activity and project costing. You can see a lot of fields here. There's quite a lot of date fields that we may or may not actually use. There's fields here that are labeled a way that maybe we don't want to label. Maybe there's, a field that we don't want people to adjust, like that % complete. It's an actual calculation. We don't want to have people put in that this is 50%. We want to use some kind of time element to calculate that % complete. We want to display it to them, but we want to gray it out. This in the traditional world would be an absolute customization. We'd be customizing the page to do that, or we create a bolt-on to do that. And that creates a huge amount of technical debt. If you look at this afterwards, and I'll just go through each of these red boxes. First off, we defaulted a value of build in the activity type. That's a page and field configurator that can default. We've changed the label on one of these fields from whatever it was before, I can't remember, to responsible parties. We changed the label of the field. We grayed out the % complete, and that's how it's grayed out. People cannot touch that. And remember, all those date fields in there, we just eliminated. We don't want to look at those. Those are all gone. And then down at the bottom, the description, we actually took that from a optional field to a required field, meaning we want people, they have to actually cannot save this component without actually putting description in there. We made that required. All of that is just simple configuration through page and field configurator. Here's one. We're looking at a page that has department information. And let's say for some reason, we don't want people to see who the manager ID is, but we still want them to be able to come to this page. So instead of just hiding that field, we actually have used the data masking functionality to simply put an X over the manager ID as well as the manager name. And so we can still roll out this field or this page or component to people, but if they don't have access, they would only see it like this, data with the data masking. One thing to point out is as this has evolved, they have now built in capabilities to even during lookups and searches to actually mask it as part of searches as well. And that's part of the features that have come in the evolution of Page and Field Configurator. One thing to point out is this: you have full flexibility with Page and Field Configurator to manage who sees it one way versus another. So here in this case, you can see that this configuration, which changes the defaults, the graying out, the taking away fields, what we're seeing here with this functionality or this user list is that that configuration applies to everybody except for one specific user. Now, normally you'd say everybody except for this specific role. Let's say you have the accounting group or the people who are doing chart field changes. Perhaps they can see everything on this page, but everybody else can still get that page, but with a very filtered view of that page. You have full flexibility with how you roll this out to various groups within your organization. So it's not like you're getting rid of that for everybody. Okay, the next feature called event mapping is a really, really powerful feature. When we look at Page and Field Configurator, that essentially is using event mapping, but it's kind of like a front-end functional analyst way of configuring event mapping, okay? So if this Page and Field Configurator doesn't take you far enough, you would then be looking at event mapping. Event mapping allows you to isolate code and to make it fire based on different events that it sees through PeopleSoft. So forever, you were able to put in people code, and that's what a developer would do. So it says, fire this people code at this point in the process of the save, or before the save, after the save, when somebody makes a change to a field, or if they just tab in a field. All those things you can say, I want to trigger something at that moment. That's people code. You can use those exact same events and map your isolated code in without actually touching the people code on the individual page. So what I always say is, like, if X happens, do Y, right? So if I see something, it's an if-then statement. If it sees something, do something. Very easy to just simple examples. HCM, add a button to generate a time report. You can do that without modifying the page by using event mapping. Financials, when a data is entered on a page, run a calculation, display that on the page. So event mapping, very, very robust, very powerful, and really answers the sort of everything else if you can't do it in Page and Field Configurator. Here's just a quick view on the back end. Now for event mapping, you're definitely, so with Page and Field Configurator is a functional analyst task, then event mapping is definitely a developer task. Okay, so you're going to engage a developer to spec this out and to build the code that you're going to isolate, create this service ID, and then bring it in to the individual tables and tell it when to fire. There's been some changes recently, so last few images that have come out have brought event mapping into a fluid nav collection. So it's a little bit easier to manage. And so again, it's continual evolution, continued innovation in this space. And if you were to talk to a developer, they're gonna tell you how much they love event mapping, because it really allows them to do a lot of really cool things. The other thing I want to point out, and this is a little bit of a stretch, I'll grant you that, because we never really had anything we did before to customize the application to do anything that approaches Oracle guided learning. Again, like I said, I did an Oracle guided learning session earlier this week, or yesterday, I guess it was, and I'm doing a demo tomorrow as well. Oracle guided learning is used now for PeopleSoft. It delivers a in-application, step-by-step process that takes anybody through any process in PeopleSoft. You can use it to say, I need to be get guidance on how to walk through this transaction because I'm a casual user and I have a life event and I have no idea how to put this life event into my HCM environment. Or I'm a manager, I come in and I approve a couple requisitions a year and I don't remember how to do approvals. Can you just walk me through what I'm supposed to do? And by simply clicking on generation of that guide through this widget, as you can see on the left side, you're going to be walked through a process that's going to guide you through the entire process. It really is pretty cool. And like I said, I'm doing a demo tomorrow if you didn't see it yesterday. One thing I'll point out that we're really excited about is that we actually can do some things that you would normally only be able to be done with event mapping. We actually can do with guided learning as well. So the example there is, for example, what if you have a person and you allow them to use a form to get reimbursements. And so they go into this, let's say it's payment request, functionality and financials, and they go in and they say, yep, start filling out for information. And it says, okay, what's your amount? And then always in PeopleSoft, there's that next field that says currency, right? And USD is in there, but let's say they change it because they say, hey, you know, I want to be paid back in Canadian dollar or something like that. Maybe I live in Canada, I want to be paid in Canadian dollar. Well, in traditional world, the way we would solve that is with event mapping. If you pop up a message and say, hey, we notice you entered Canadian dollar. You can't enter Canadian dollar. We can't let you do that. And you won't let you save it without that. And there's my dogs entering the conversation. Sorry about that. And so traditional use of event mapping will be able to handle that. Of course, with page and field configurator, we could gray that out and keep it as USD. But let's say we didn't want to do anything with page and field configurator or event mapping. We actually can do that with Oracle Guided Learning too. We can trigger guides and say, hey, we noticed you put in USD on this. Would you like to be guided through a process? Or sorry, we see that you didn't put USD. Would you like to be guided through a process to enter this in the right way? Or just simply, you entered non-USD, please enter USD. So the types of things we can do now with those guides to actually capture specific events that are happening on PeopleSoft or something that people are doing data entry is taking Oracle Guided Learning even to another place beyond learning, which is really cool. Again, come to my session if you want to learn more about Oracle Guided Learning. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Any questions so far on the first section? Again, feel free to just enter the chat window and enter any questions. All right, the next use case, we have organization-specific data entry needs. So what would that be in the old world? That would be page changes, record changes, and then adding those perhaps additional pages into a component. Yes, you have a bolt-on page, but yes, you've also customized the component by bringing your page into that component, as well as perhaps the underlying record structure. So what's the new way? The new way is user-defined fields, activity guides, forms, and approvals, and drop zones. So let's take a look at some of these. So an activity guide. An activity guide is delivered as part of specific fluid transactions. So you can see here the payment request. The activity guide is a train stop process that takes a complex transaction and it breaks it down into train stops and multiple steps for a user to enter a more complex transaction. Activity guide can be left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4. An activity guide can be done in a more of a up and down sort of fashion where you're going through step by step. The activity guide is not only a technology or a methodology to enter or for Oracle to deliver complex transactions like payment requests, but it's also a feature that you can use to build your own special processes or data entry needs. So activity guides both being used, but it's also a configurable tool set that you can use to build your own, again, without customization. Forms and approvals, this allows you to build your own forms without customization. You build them through the front end, and this can be attached to approval. So let's say here we've got a tuition reimbursement that we wanted to add essentially as a bolt-on. And ultimately, this will become a voucher that would then be generated with a payment off to somebody who's entering this. You can create this to the front end, allow people to go in and type their information in, and then submit for approval. You can attach approval workflow, to this transaction, and approved transactions would then eventually be with a component interface, moved all this data into a core transaction or a core component like a voucher to then be paid through your normal AP processes. Again, very simple example, but it's a way to leverage the forms and approval functionality to build something without going into a customization. Drop zones. So drop zones exist throughout the financials and HCM applications. They exist on a lot of pages where Oracle deemed them to be most relevant. So things like requisition and other places in HCM that typically are modified to handle additional information. So here you can see an example of a requisition where we're capturing additional information as part of that requisition. So what happens here, and you always were able to do this before by creating essentially a subpage in PeopleSoft Application Design. You create a subpage, and then you bring that subpage into the primary page. And that essentially is the same methodology you're going to do in a drop zone. The only difference now is that you don't have to modify and customize that primary page with a customization. You're just essentially using the drop zone, which is a pre-configured spot for you to drop that subpage into. So it's essentially, it's like, it's ready for your bolt-on. Let's put it that way. It's ready for your isolated code. So on the back end, you can pull up the component. Here we're looking at expense report entry. And then there's spots where you can then drop in your additional page. So here we have a custom subpage that we created, and we're saying we want that to show up at the top of the expense report header. So you have top of the header, bottom of the header, top of the line, bottom of the line. So by adding that, you can just basically bring your own isolated code and fields into a delivered page, 100% delivered functionality here with zero customization. Now you could consider doing something like with event mapping, where the event mapping looks for some kind of trigger that it sees, and then it displays perhaps the subpage in the drop zone. So that's a common sort of methodology to say, we're looking for some trigger, and once we see it, display this drop zone subpage. But you can, if you want it just to be permanently present, you can just do it through this normal drop zone, and that's a standard process. Okay, again, I'll pause. Any questions on those? And again, I apologize, we have a lot of content to go through. Okay, sure, but forms got lots of limitations. Don't disagree, but it does give you some great options. And if you can work within those constraints, you have some great options. And I see Jim also replied, share, use event mapping with fluid forms. Okay, so, yep, there you go. So event mapping, great way to overcome some of that. We always say, look, try your best to, push this delivered functionality to its extreme, and really start there before you just go automatically to doing custom build stuff, or isolated build stuff. So especially with forms, you can do a lot with them. And but I don't disagree that the forms have some limitations. Okay, any other questions before we move on? Okay, all right, so now let's talk about custom logic. So let's say, we don't like the way the delivered app engine runs. We have an SQR that does some stuff with our data and takes in data, it transforms it, it calculates it, and puts it somewhere else. Again, that's our own custom logic. We don't like how the logic works from Oracle. We want it to be our own modified logic. So two things with that: event mapping, which we already talked about, that's through the front end. So event mapping can trigger an app engine. It could trigger additional pages on the or calculations to do really tons of stuff. If you want to modify an app engine, you have now something called pluggable app engine, which is really pretty cool. So the same concept of a drop zone, where there's basically an ability to create your subpage and bring that onto the main page. Same thing here with pluggable app engine. You identify your own logic, and there's ability to use predefined hooks to bring your logic into the delivered logic. Okay, and so there's the path, PeopleTools app engine, a action plugin. So basically, anytime a delivered app engine needs to be customized, there's zero reason to customize that app engine now. So if you have a customized app engine, if you've taken a delivered app engine and made any modifications to it, you absolutely have a shovel-ready way to get rid of that customization using the app engine plugin. So here's a quick view of that. I'm looking at a delivered app engine here. I'm saying I want to insert basically our own code here. I've got my plugin name on the right, FC reminder. I'm saying here's the section, the step, the action is SQL. There's a couple different actions that you could actually trigger. and I want this to fire after section 100,000, step 10, SQL on the left side. That's the delivered part of that app engine. I'm saying my stuff, I want it to fire right after that part of the app engine. Now you can even use a mode of replace. So it can actually say, I want to replace the logic over here in this app engine step. And it's basically everything you do currently with your app engine, any customizations to your app engine, you can use this to do the same thing. Now we always say, look, you can do that, but that does then cause you a retrofit next time. Now, it's not a customization retrofit, but this configuration will come forward when you do your upgrade. Your plugin will come forward. It'll be linked to the delivered app engine. So there might not be any kind of code changes as long as you test it and it works properly. But remember, when you're talking about delivered app engines, Oracle will continue to modify those app engines. So you could essentially look at the release notes, take a look at what changes happened in the app engine, figure out if your bolt-on, your isolated code needs to be modified. And generally it probably won't. These app engines are pretty stable. And the only reason they're changed is really for bug fixes at this point for a lot of the delivered app engines. But just point out that if you do this, you are changing the underlying logic of that delivered app engine, and your testing needs to then make sure that that doesn't cause a problem for you. Okay, any questions on Pluggable App Engine? Okay, keep moving. All right, custom portal menus and workflow. So the old, I say, how many times, and have you said this before? Because I know I've said it before. Hey, can you just bring back the breadcrumbs? Can we just, I just want to see where I'm at. Favorites, homegrown portal or integration hub. So those are sort of the old way of dealing with this, of kind of putting together custom portals and modifying your menu and doing customizations, bring back how it used to look. A lot of that's not required anymore. Now, I will say that the latest PeopleTools that's coming out very soon will have some semblance of the breadcrumbs in your menu. Actually, I think that comes in 859. I have to take it back. I think that was in 859. You can see that. So you do have a little bit of that, not exactly what people are used to from before, but you have a little bit of that already coming back in the form of some of the menu. But I would suggest to you that if you're really concerned about breadcrumbs and that's your primary focus, you need to take a step back and say, why do we care about the breadcrumbs? Why are we trying to get people to remember how to get to 4 or 5 places deep in the menu? Why don't we just make that easier for them? So with home pages now, we can create home pages that have tiles that take them directly to a specific page. The home pages are way better than anything we could do with the menu, because home pages offer the combination of Kibana dashboards, pivot grid numbers and metrics, KPIs, as well as things like approvals and how many approvals do you have to do. That number shows up right there in the tile. So there's a huge advantage to go to home pages. From there, you can go to WorkCenters that offer you some really awesome features, nav collections. In fact, I'm going to get into it here. So let's take a look at these things. WorkCenters. If I was in a room with you, I'd say how many people are using WorkCenters. I hope that a lot of people have raised their hand. Some WorkCenters are more robust than others, the delivered ones. This is one that's a little bit more robust in the billing WorkCenter. If you look here on the left side, you have numbers associated with these actions of, let's say, invoices not finalized. So instead of the traditional world where I have to go navigate through my menu and find the spot for looking up invoices and then doing search criteria that says which ones are not finalized, and eventually I've taken 4 or 5 steps, and eventually I get to a part where it says, here's 28 for you. I can simply come to the WorkCenter and it tells me without doing any kind of search that I have 28 invoices not finalized. That's my action. I've got 3 consolidated invoices not finalized. I've got 2 installment invoices not generated and 2 recurring invoices not generated. I don't need to do a search for invoices pending approval or invoices not submitted for approval. I don't need to do a search for that because my filter right here is already telling me that I have no action to take. So this is streamlining the process for people to be able to go into WorkCenters and just say, I don't need to do a search. I already know I've got actions to take. Beyond that, if you look now at the right side, I can look at my transactions. I can drill into any of these transactions, but the thing I really like is that I can select individual transactions here and use my actions button at the top, which by the way is called related actions. I'm going to talk about that later. But that's completely delivered that I could take that and say, go ahead and finalize these invoices in bulk. 1, 2, all of them. I can do that through generally just checking these boxes and doing the action from the top. So it's really consolidating multiple different steps that I used to take through different pages all into one spot in the Work Center. This is a great way to think about, I've got actions I take, I do my actions, and it kicks it down to the next group. Maybe it's an AR group or accounting group that then takes that and it shows up in their queue. Work Centers are fantastic. Here it says, only take action when needed. And here's a sort of what I was just mentioning, how I can select 4 of these specific invoices. And then I can say, you know what, I want an email notification on these invoices. And all I do is check the box and then say email notification. Everything you see there completely delivered in the Billing Work Center. And like I said, this one's pretty robust. It's got a little bit more features than other Work Centers out there. But you know, it's really, really fantastic. Okay, NAV collection used differently than the Work Center. While Work Center gives you more of a specific predefined search to look up specific transactions that you need to take action on, this NAV collections are delivered and give you essentially exactly like it says. It's a collection of different pages or components that you might want to go to. So for example, and they're all kind of more functionally based. So for example, HR administration, you might have things like job information, headcount, labor, org chart, onboarding. It's all the things that would be appropriate for a group that handles HR administration. Now, each time you go to these pages, you are going to essentially a page that's out there on the menu, but it's a one-stop shop. And this brings in things from core modular areas, plus setup areas, perhaps even places from reporting tools, query, all that stuff can be brought right in here into this one spot. And it should be a one-stop shop. So, you know, for a recent, not so recent now, implementation we did for somebody who went straight onto PeopleSoft and had never seen PeopleSoft before, we did an implementation for them and we drove everything through Work Centers and nav collections. They never navigate through the menu. And so again, like I said, if you're talking and thinking about how do we bring back breadcrumbs, you need to take a step back and say, what do modern applications use now? And it's not a menu that is 4 or 5 folders deep to where you need to get to. So think about that as a way to modernize also your use of the system. Lastly, unified navigation, and lastly, I should say in this section, unified navigation is a way to bring together your financials, HCM, maybe Campus, if you want to bring that into one combined area. You no longer need Integration Hub or other sort of custom portals to bring things together. This is simply a configuration through unified navigation. And you can see, I don't have the screenshots here, but or the outlines here, but you can see things like e-procurement is a financials, time entry might be HCM, employee snapshot is HCM, payment request is financials. So we have 2 different instances of PeopleSoft, financials and HCM. We're bringing into one combined homepage. And that works really well for things like employee self-service, manager self-service. Any questions on this section? Okay, we've been using navigations. So Stephen, St. Laurent, we have been using navigation collections with a tile on a homepage to help users consolidate their workload. Perfect. Yep, that's exactly how you do it. That is best practice for how to get people to take a step away from the ledge, take a step away from the menu, and use the homepages very effectively. Okay, movement of data in or out of PeopleSoft. So we've got customizations of SQR, customization of App Engine, customer-specific SQRs. So nothing earth-shattering here. The one thing I will point out, so integration broker, Excel to CI, I've done this presentation before, and a lot of people who are like developers don't like it when I talk about Excel to CI, but we'll just say we agree to disagree. I think Excel to CI is great, and it provides a level of validation of data going into the system. So if you don't know about Excel DCI, definitely check that out. It's a way to upload data into anywhere in PeopleSoft. You've got outbound SQR web services, and then application data sets, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. So component interface, like I mentioned, basically an API that brings data into PeopleSoft. The thing I really like is that it follows your security, and it provides validation as if you were in the application. So you can't enter bad data. It tells you right in Excel, and it stops that data from going in right there in Excel. And so for loading lots of data at once, Excel DCI is a great option for that. I wouldn't use it for, you know, if you're going to build this robust interface, you're going to do something different. Potentially you work with a developer, but for an end user who wants to upload some transaction data, or let's say a list of suppliers or a list of customers, Excel DCI great and can be used for that very effectively. All right, application data sets. So this is really cool. This replaces data mover scripts. So you can still do data mover scripts. The thing about this, though, is that it's a repeatable process that's built through the front end. And there's a lot of, you know, stuff here on the screen, a bit of an eye chart on the right side. But basically, you create a preset set of configuration, data, etc., and then you can reuse that. So what does that work for? It works for if you're doing configuration in a non-prod environment and you want to upload that configuration straight into prod. A lot of times we say, you know what, just do it manually in production. And that works until it doesn't. It works until somebody fat fingers that configuration into production. And then you're saying, well, maybe we should have spent a little bit more time in building a repeatable process. That's the great thing about application data sets, and it's a feature that you can use and build that as repeatable. There is upfront setup time, and then you do have to still test that the migration worked properly. But application data set, great way to use that. All right, good questions. Custom lookups and references. So we got page customizations, adding links, query, offline reports. And so let's talk about the related content framework. So related content framework enables ability to link application pages with contextually relevant collaborative content. That's a really fancy way of saying that you might be on one page and you might need to get some information from another page. So let's take a look at it in action. So here we're in an asset management page, and we're looking at the basic ad. So it's just basic information about this asset that's sort of more administrative in nature. What's the tag number? Is there, you know, what PO did this come from? You know, that sort of thing. You get that in this component. But let's say you want to look at some cost, and that's on a completely different component. This is completely delivered related content. You can click on that, and you actually can get access to the cost history. It shows up as a secondary screen on top of the primary screen. So you haven't left that transaction or that screen previously. Just giving you contextual information. You can look at that and say, okay, there's the cost associated with this. You can close that pop-up sort of screen, and you're back still at the primary screen. In the old way, you'd leave that primary component or screen, you go to secondary, and then you have to go back. And now with the related content, you can do that. Related actions is like related content, but it's designed to not only view something, but actually take action. Again, it uses a secondary window or a modal window that kind of hovers over the primary window and allows you to take action. So similar to what happened when you saw that under the Work Center with the Billing Work Center, here you have a time entry screen where on a specific person, I'm on a specific day. And from that, instead of entering information for that one person, maybe their time for that day, I actually can do related actions, which says, you know, enter an attendance violation, or I can view exception. I can run a report or an inquiry into the exceptions. I can get a summary of this. I can cancel an absence. So these are actions taken on top of this. So the primary transaction is to enter time for this person, but I can link related actions to do other things, and I don't leave that primary screen. That's related actions. Okay, and I know I'm moving fast, but I'm coming down to the end of my time. Okay, no questions? Okay, analysis and reporting, query, reports, homegrown analytics, pivot grids, and combined analytics. Question?
It looks like we did have a question come in. Yeah. Is there a guide to find out which records are needed to build the data sets for move-in AGs, event mapping, etc.?
Is there a guide to understand which? Okay, so I thought we were talking about. I thought the question was going to be about application data sets, but then they said event mapping. So you still have the same tools you always have as a developer, like traces and things like that. If you want to just enter some transaction, hit save, and see what's happening, so you can still do that. Beyond that, you can break down what's happening in people code to see what happens with save edits and things of that nature. There might be a more specialized answer to that a developer could answer better than I could. If whoever asked that question wants to get my email address and send me that question offline, we could probably take that question offline.
Thank you.
Okay, pivot grids. You guys have seen them. Maybe you rolled them out, maybe you didn't. There might be some, with pivot grids, there's a lot of issues with performance. I think what we always say with pivot grids now that we have Kibana is let's consider Kibana as a primary source for analytics. Pivot grid's still great if you want to embed like metrics and KPIs into your application, but Kibana is really kind of taking over the primary analytics. So now they're not taking a step away from pivot grids. They're still going to be all over the place, and all of the delivered things that they delivered before are still there. Like here you see top 20 employee spenders, so in the travel expense area, all that's still there. But Kibana is just so much more robust and more flexible that it's really replacing a lot of things. My colleague, Gary Dranakowski, take that name down if you ever want to talk analytics. He's really great at talking you through the differences between pivot grids, query, other types of reporting, and Kibana. And he does our training for Kibana. So the great thing about this, I'll just say, is that you have actions. So here you can see related actions. Remember, we talked about that before. And related actions can be embedded in pivot grids. So there you go. There's a differentiator, something we can do in pivot grids that we can't do necessarily in Kibana. But let's talk about Kibana. Very, very robust, delivered dashboards based on Elasticsearch content. This, if you haven't looked into Kibana yet, you need to look into Kibana because it is pretty straightforward to roll out based on if you've migrated to Elasticsearch and have those search indexes built. The Kibana dashboards should work fairly seamlessly on top of that Elasticsearch data. If you want to build your own new data sets, Elasticsearch can handle that with those search indexes and then bringing those into dashboards. So here, first two, you're looking at workforce composition, and then this one is a workforce insight, two dashboards on the HCM side, and then a couple on the financial side. So one for payables, and then one for kind of financial and accounting. So delivered dashboards, there's so much feature-rich functionality here. They look really good. They perform really well based on large data sets, frankly, in ways that pivot grids don't perform well with large data sets. So something you definitely need to consider. And like I said, we've done sessions on Kibana. I believe there's another session that we're doing on Kibana, so take a look at that. And if not, just reach out to me and I'll hook you up with Gary Dranakowski. And with that, I've got about 5 minutes left, and it was drinking through the fire hose. I'm exhausted. You're probably exhausted. But what questions do you have on any of the content that we covered today? I'll leave it open just for a few minutes. And in fact, if you would like to just unmute yourself at this point and just ask any question, that's okay too. All right, I see Jim's been my Jim's been my wingman today. He's answering questions for left and right here. So so it looks like he already answered a question on ADS, which is very nice. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself at this point. We have a couple minutes left. All right, well, if there's no other questions, this is my information here. That's my email address, my phone number. Feel free to call, text, email me, and happy. And as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this stuff. I really like talking about it. If you have a very specific technical question, I will pull in the right person and we'll get an answer for you on that. I really like to see our customers moving forward. We help them move forward with this and decustomizations. A lot of times that happens as part of PUM updates. We can do that for you if that's something you might be interested in. And yeah, thanks for being with me today. I appreciate it. Sorry I talked a lot, talked fast, but hopefully you guys got a lot of good content. Definitely download the deck and look through the screenshots if you want examples of these things. And with that, if there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I think we'll call the time. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining. We'll see you around.
Thank you.